Morning, everyone. Yeah, we're on. Uh, okay, so as you can see, this is a new house. I'm still not really in my house. Uh, it's a weekend, so I can't do anything about it. But I was going over the videos that I recorded 2 days ago, and I realized that the naming convention that I have is horrible. But then I was like, okay, so if I were to kind of search for them and go back and go, hey man, okay, so this is how would I go back to search for something I thought of before? Or since I'm posting it on video, how would somebody want to get to the core of something that we're trying to do? And I did that through noticing the YouTube videos also have playlists and all kinds of stuff. So maybe, I don't know, there's some linking that needs to be involved with different playlists and all kinds of things. So the first thing I thought of was the title because the title has to represent exactly what we're doing and then basically an actual outline. And so far, uh, well, let's just say I haven't evolved to a point in whatever it is I'm doing that required it until now. So now I'm looking at it because before I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And the first 25 videos were literally just me reflecting on what I'm doing, looking at what I'm doing throughout the day, posting the random things that I am considering as I'm thinking of the stuff that I'm doing and approaching them. And remember, every day for me is a day that kind of like I don't want to say repeats itself because that word is because the day is not repeating itself. It's a new day, but the activities in the day are kind of like there's the bare minimum that I have to do and the other stuff that I have to engage with. So slowly, I have been basically expanding my thought processes, and it got to a point where I realized like sometimes I kind of like only discuss philosophical stuff, while other days I'm only discussing like concepts and what are the things that I'm trying to do and how is this contributing to it. And other stuff, sometimes I'm discussing it in the day, sometimes in the night, sometimes I'm discussing it at work, sometimes I'm discussing it at home, sometimes I'm discussing it in a completely different country. And all of these are back and forth between me and myself that kind of like change depending on a whole lot of factors. And I feel like these factors are necessary for me to kind of like highlight in order for me to be able to create some form of consistency, especially in my head. So the simplest form of thinking about it me was literally like if I were to go back to these videos, how would I go back to them? How would I know which video which? I personally can actually look back at the date because the mind is more of a spatial thing. And okay, that's something maybe we need to talk about. Like we evolved for thousands of years. Let's just assume that we evolved through basically just looking at landscapes. And it could have been buildings, it could have been all kinds of stuff, but ultimately we're spatial. Like our eyes kind of visualized everything around us. So for me, anytime I think of something, what I do is I kind of like the first thing that comes to mind is the setting and the bigger aspects of it. Like if I were to reflect on something I discussed regarding my work in Iraq, the first thing I go back to is where I was like sleeping in Iraq and the company and how it looked and the roads over there. Like that's the first thing that comes to mind. And I think that's how triggers work in your head. So I don't know if I did that video yet, but I have to check, right? Like so, like these kinds of things when I'm thinking about them, I kind of have to be able to like check them and in a more like in a detailed way to understand that I'm not really repeating myself because I think that's what mental clutter actually looks like, where you think of something and then you go back and think about it again and again and again. And if you don't go back to the point where you actually like finished it, you don't move past that. You kind of go back to what you mostly remember about it, and that kind of like becomes inefficient and very ineffective. So, so now if I want to think of something, the words pop up and instead of me like looking at the whole memory lane of where I actually did stuff and having to go dig deep into it, I need to be able to kind of search for it. So it's a systematized approach. I have no idea how legit it is, but like in the course that I did on online marketing, that's how they kind of like save their ads. They kind of like it's a lot simpler, right? Because when you're looking at ads, you're looking at who are the people you're targeting, what's the campaign, what's the design about, what's the concept behind it, what's the thought process, what's the content. Like you kind of like start with like the overall and then you dive deeper into what this ad is, and then ultimately you have like 15, 20 different ads. And if they all represent the same context, they're like under one file, and then if they represent like something else, like a file inside a file, and like basically it becomes more of a tree-ish kind of connection where all you have to do is go back to this context where you were thinking about something, and you end up finding the ad based on what the purpose was, the purpose of the ad was. I could explain it better, but I'll actually go one day in the near future. I probably will have to do that within the next month. And I'll review what I actually learned from it, because now I only have the broad concept, and I'll probably just like understand fully how they're being split and how ads are being made, and it'll make me feel better about the naming convention. So the thought process, just for myself, made me realize that that's against the actual, like, what I'm trying to do right now is like go over my notes of what happened when I was in Iraq with the client that I have, and sitting here basically, and I was like, the more inefficient I thought, the more I realized, like, if this was an actual series about like a whole lot of stuff, these couple of videos kind of like, if I wanted to do a full week about this, then anything I think in between has to kind of come out differently, even though it's the same, it has to come out differently. And it made me look at YouTube differently, and made me start seeing that I have to like kind of like put in a bit more effort in how I organize stuff. And the minute I thought of that, I realized how awful it must be for anyone who's trying to approach my channel, if that's going to be a case or something like this. How it's just basically most of the videos are randomized for me, and basically they're numerical for me, but they don't support anyone looking from the outside. And that's something that I had to engage with myself with, because I am trying to look at myself objectively. But everything I do, I'm doing it from myself. So it's a subjective output, but then an objective outlook. I'm going to take a note of that. So it's video 33, reflection on naming conventions. Subjective output, but objective outlook. So I have to, everything that comes out of me has to be from me. So I'm very much personally involved. But the objectivity about it needs to come from an outside perspective. And since my work is kind of like the taking notes and the recording and all these smaller things that contribute to something bigger. Right now, these are the thoughts that are going in my head. And I realized that if I have to take a step, if I want to take a step forward or something like this, I kind of have to go through this. I have to sit with myself and be like, okay, so this and this and this and this, and be able to separate, to be able to look at my whatever I did in a more like, it is objective, but like a cold-hearted, how would somebody looking from the outside actually like see it? And I'm gonna tell you, man, it's definitely not something I'd be interested in. It completely looks like a randomized what am I getting today kind of like structure, right? Like the only thing that's actually consistent within my videos are the numbers that I have on top. And I think the numbers are valid for me, so I can basically keep track of the videos in a certain kind of way, or keep track of my own head. But like for the people that look at them from the outside, or if I were to look at them from the outside, and if I were to put myself in a position where I want to learn from these videos, I think it'll be a horrible experience. And me admitting this is, I think, one of the bigger steps towards starting to evolve in this, which I very much like intentionally didn't care for at the beginning. But I guess that's what, when people talk about like, and you kind of have to do a lot until you start being able to see how you're doing it, and then being able to, your mind starts basically looking at things and going like, this kind of doesn't make sense, but hey, you were proud of it at one point. And I think that's basically that's basically the reflection of today before I actually start the work of like finalizing how my notes were in the respective videos. So I don't know. Uh, yeah, I think the title of today's video should be Subjective Output but Objective Outlook. Fucking awesome. Thank you.